This is Power 98.7. And now you're listening to Power Talk with Mbuyiseni and Dlozi, 9 a.m. to midday, taking your calls on 0861 987 000.
Welcome back, Bantwana Benkosi. This is Power Talk. You would have heard that the National Council of Provinces had a oversight visit, I imagine, at the KZN headquarters of the South African Police Service, and it meeting was taking place yesterday. It seems to have been a meeting that was already planned before the press conference that General Mkhwanazi had to blow the whistle. I'm joined by the National Council of Provinces member, Mzamo Billy. Welcome to Power Talk. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Mbuyiseni, and thanks to your show for inviting us.
Yes, if you could please take us into confidence as to the details of your meeting yesterday and its outcome.
Look, I think firstly, you've correctly described it as an oversight visit. You would probably know best that Parliament, when it is on constituency break, members of Parliament are required to go back to their provinces or to their constituencies and conduct oversight and meet with municipalities and departments to see how best they can be able to assist or escalate matters to Parliament or to the relevant departments. So that's exactly what we did as members of the NCOP from the province of KZN. We are currently embarking on those oversights, which we have labeled as stakeholder engagements. We've met with the South African Police Service in the province, which was a long-planned meeting, just to try and understand the challenges that the police are facing in the province in them dealing with crime, and how best we as lawmakers can be able to escalate some of those challenges, including legislative issues, including issues of capacity and resources, budget, and so on. And we had a very fruitful meeting with the police management in the province, which included the provincial commissioner.
And what did you find?
Look, most of the issues are issues that have always been there, but it's always best to hear from the people that are on the front line. And those issues include issues of lack of resources, not enough policemen and women, not enough police vehicles, rural areas not having police stations, the police not having proper headquarters in KZN. They're renting a building for millions of rand on a monthly basis, and those are some of the issues that came from the provincial commissioner, and we obviously, were able to identify issues that we can immediately be able to escalate, and we then committed to touching base again in 3 months' time.
You met one of South Africa's biggest whistleblowers about essentially a compromised leadership of the police, members of parliament, business people, National Prosecuting Authority. He blew the whistle to this effect. There's a commission of inquiry appointed, and so on and so forth. Did this matter arise in any way? If yes, what was the discussion?
No. The matter on the allegations that the provincial commissioner had made was not part of the agenda. As I've said, this was a long-planned meeting, which strictly was about members of parliament conducting an oversight into a department that is of concern to us. Issues of crime in the province are a big thing, and we did not want to get into a space that we are not mandated to get into. Parliament has established an ad hoc committee to look into the allegations, and we've got full confidence in that process. The President has also initiated the Commission of Inquiry, which will also do its own work, and we saw it best that we not get into that space, that we allow the relevant structures or authorities to be able to process the issues of allegations.
Okay, thanks very much, NCOP spokesperson Mzamo Billy. Thanks indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
That's it, Bantwana Benkosi. The voice you've just heard is of the NCOP telling us about a meeting they had with Mkhwanazi. I don't know that we are able to get any form of update in relation to what the General brought to national spotlight. But I'm joined by Chad Thomas, who is going to help us take stock because today is exactly 30 days since General Mkhwanazi has had a press conference in which explosive allegations were made. Chad, thanks very much for coming through and always creating time for us here on the show.
I appreciate the invite and I love being on the show. The intro music is always so enjoyable considering the seriousness of the topic that we're going to be discussing. So you get into a jive mood and then you realize, whoa, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about.
We've got a lot to talk about. Okay, 30 days. I don't know that maybe your first reaction to the report that we've just had by the NCOP. And I want to play a clip thereafter of the General just to recap those allegations. But what's your reaction? The NCOP says it went for an oversight visit, met the man of the match, and yet seemingly have nothing to say about what they saw. They didn't seem to have a conversation about the issues. What do you make of that? Parliament useless?
Look, you come from Parliament. You understand the protocols and perhaps the frustrations. And the spokesperson was very diplomatic when he said we had a mandate. We didn't want to overreach by discussing things that an ad hoc committee has already been established for. But much like you, I'm very inquisitive and curious in nature. And knowing that this is such a bombshell, I would want to interrogate it further. I would find some way of raising the issue based on what the oversight outcome was. So in other words, if I'm there to talk about a deficit in leadership or policing equipment, etc., I would use that as an introduction to perhaps ask questions about that press conference that took place 30 days ago. What also surprises me, and in anticipation of this interview, I listened again to Mkhwanazi in Parliament, where he virtually appeared before the Police Oversight Committee in March. And there wasn't much difference to that particular briefing that he gave to Parliament to what he gave us 30 days ago. Yes. It just wasn't covered as extensively, and it seemed as if it went over everybody's head. And I can understand his frustration. So I was quite surprised by Breitenbach coming out yesterday and saying that this is something he should have brought before Parliament. He did in March. In January, he started speaking about this. We know already in December of last year, there were problems within these factions within the police that were creating this disinformation campaigns and fighting amongst one another. So it's very interesting that we talk about it now being 30 days, but in actual fact, he brought all of this up in the correct forum as far back as March of this year.
Yes, 5th, I think, of March. It seems to me, by implication, and you once said on the show, as a society, we've become desensitized to crime. When a person says, I've been mugged, that was your example, we say, did they hurt you? Because we overlook the fact that the mugging itself is a hurtful experience already. We are all to blame, it seems to me, for the March event. All of us never replayed those allegations. All of us never followed up. I mean, personally, of course, I can account that we tried to get the General to the show. we tried to have a sit down with the general. And I think maybe he felt, let me give Parliament a space. But there wasn't this type of concerted effort to find out who Brown Mkhwanazi is, if indeed what he's saying is confirmed. It seems to me not just Parliament, but perhaps NGOs, perhaps civil society, as well as the media.
We need to be a lot more invested in our country. We cannot be non-active participants. We all smiled when the EFF first went to Parliament because suddenly everybody watched Sona. Nobody watched Sona before that. They made Parliament relevant again. People would now watch Sona because they wanted to see what would happen, what surprise move would be made. But we shouldn't just be there for the entertainment value. We shouldn't only be there for Sona. We should, as active citizens, instead of sitting complaining to one another, be active participants. Parliament, after all, is there to represent our interests, and we need to ensure that our interests are being represented. And I, as somebody who operates in this space, also feel that I should have had a vested interest in hearing what the General had to say to that oversight committee, but perhaps it wasn't. It was a closed-door session. I'm not sure, but it definitely was not reported on the manner in which his explosive press conference was reported on.
Let's take a listen to the General.
1 years of imprisonment. This is the work done by the team since 2018 to date that have led into the successful prosecution because of this integration working between the SAPS and the prosecution. On the 26th of March 2025, this year, a total of 121 case dockets that were under investigation were taken away from the task team as directed by a Deputy National Commissioner Crime Detection, a Lt General Sibia, who was acting on the instruction of the Minister of Police to disband the team. This was done without the authority of the National Commissioner, nor I, as a Provincial Commissioner, was never informed. These case dockets have since March been sitting at the head office ever since without any investigation work done on them. 5 of these dockets had already instruction to arrest perpetrators, but nothing has been done because a Lieutenant General Sibia, being instructed by the Minister, executing instruction of the Minister, withdrew all these dockets and they are sitting in archive in his office in Pretoria. God knows why. Therefore, only a total of 112 dockets which are still in court, of which 54 of them are political related and others will include parallel ad hoc, as well as the dockets that are involving the incident at Fort Hare University, and 5 of them are traditional leadership, are still with the team at this present moment.
Chad, this is 2 things for me. Sibia. Can you give the listeners a quick background of General Sibia?
Interesting background. My understanding is that he started as an investigator in Telkom. He studied avidly. He eventually became an advocate. After Telkom, he joined the Scorpions, rose through the ranks. He was then, when the Scorpions were disbanded, he was posted to the DPCI, the Hawks. He eventually became head of Gauteng Hawks. There was a lot of disinformation doing the rounds regarding his leadership at the time, and there was factions again within the DPCI Gauteng Hawks. Allegations raised against him that were defended. Some bizarre allegations. One of the people that made the allegations, who cannot be taken very seriously, was a chap called Piet Viljoen from the Tammy Taylor nail franchise, who's landed up nailing, pardon the pun, so many people. But Sibia, for all intents and purposes, seemed to be the right person at the time. Then, of course, there was the whole controversy about the so-called unlawful extraditions that had taken place in respect of Zimbabwean citizens involving, they tried to link him to Cowboy Maluleka, to Anwar Dramat, etc. And things just went south. He left the employment of the Southern Police Services and his position as head of Gauteng Hawks, and was then later employed by the DA-led City of Johannesburg as the head of GFIS, which is Group Forensic and Investigation Services. It's like the in-house investigative capacity for the City of Johannesburg, where he served until he went back into SAPS. He's no longer in the Hawks. Of course, he was shortlisted, and everybody thought he'd become head of the Hawks when Labia left. In fact, it was a given that he was going to be the head of the Hawks until 2 weeks before. And this was before, of course, the bombshell by Mkhwanazi. There were some other things that had come out regarding some businessmen in KZN that he was allegedly linked to, and some other issues. So that position was placed on hold for a further 4 months. And he's maintained this role now as the Deputy Commissioner responsible for detection services. All detectives in the country, SAPS, report to Sabir.
Why would he be the go-to person, if the allegations of Mkhwanazi are true, to repossess the dockets of this political killings unit? Well, not possess them, but take them and keep them in his office. Why would he be the go-to person?
As national head of detectives, he would have the resources, the facilities, the capacity to have members from either his head office or from different provincial offices, of which he has overall control. You must remember, he's the Deputy National Commissioner in charge of detectives. So he would be able to ensure that those dockets are effectively allocated with the intention of being investigated and closed.
Is it fair to triangulate Breitenbach's, Glenys Breitenbach's attitude towards the press conference of Mkhwanazi to the fact that the DA had hired Sibiya, who is one of the people attacked by Mkhwanazi in Johannesburg? Could it be that the DA possibly is experiencing an existential conflict of interest, and we are reading this then in Glenys's outburst in the public?
It's a stretch, but it's plausible. And the reason why I say it's plausible is the DA, from a reputational management perspective, can't be seen as hiring somebody that has been seen as controversial for a very long time, and it's now come out again. You must remember, this deficit of leadership, this factionalism, dates back a long time. We had the Browse Mole report. We then had the ground coverage report. Yes. We've had so many of these different reports that have led to commissions, they've led to inquiries, they've led to different investigations, and we've had a lot of bad actors within the police service. For him to have left, and he aligned himself during this time with many of the people that were involved in the SARS SSA debacle. So Sabir had aligned himself with the Van Lochrenbergs, with the Riggers, with the Pillets. He aligned himself with Boyson. He aligned himself with a lot of people that at some stage were controversial, including Robert McBride. And despite the fact that this has now been ventilated, Boyson has now been vindicated, Van Lochrenberg has now been vindicated, there's still this group of individuals that believe that they were particularly targeted and prejudiced by a group within the so-called capture narrative. And as a result of that, and because of this grouping, they received the support of people that were obviously anti the ruling party at the time. And the most vocal party at the time was the DA. So it stands to reason that the DA still feels obliged to support these very same people that they've supported for over a decade now. When one looks at when the Browse Mole report came out, when the ground coverage report came out, when the whole SARS SSA issue began 2013, 2014, we're talking over a decade now. So there could be this sense of loyalty. There could be this sense of, well, if we sided with them, we're in for a penny, we're in for a pound. But I do believe there's something to what you say.
Ian Cameroon. And I will come to the members of the committee, but he's chairing at the time of March. Everybody, particularly within the crime-fighting circles, knows Ian Cameron to be a serious crime buster. What accounts for the reluctance on his part to elevate to the highest level the report that Mkhwanazi gave to them in that committee?
I can't speak for the reluctance, and I suppose hindsight and 2020 vision is something that we all look to and we say, well, what would we have done differently? He should have escalated it. He should have done something more about it. I watched that entire 4-hour session that took place, and I don't know whether he was shocked, surprised at the end, or whether he was, perhaps taken aback by the allegations. But when you look at it in context, and like I mentioned, I watched it again last night, Mkhunu responds, and he responds and he ends, and then he comes back and he says, oh, there was a fellow mentioned, and he brings in Brown Mkhwanazi, which Mkhwanazi had mentioned during his briefing. That was the biggest mistake Mkhunu had made. He should have left it at that. That in itself opened up an opportunity for a deeper investigation into these bad actors who are on the peripheries of the police, that are not formally employed, yet have some or other connection
and
to people.
Access to sensitive police records that require the highest security clearances.
Correct.
Let's take a quick listen at Mkhwanazi's clip on Brown Mkhwanazi.
Mr. Brown Mkhwanazi sends a WhatsApp message to myself, Lt General Mkhwanazi, regarding the allegation on the defeating the ends of justice matters which were widely publicized, which involves an incident that happened at the correctional service at Impangeni in KwaZulu-Natal. Mr. Brown sends this message in September last year, long before the news came out in public about the incident that happened at Impangeni. He sends this message. In this message that he sends to the provincial commissioner, he attaches a police letter, and he attaches a copy of the occurrence book, a register that is used at the police station that's supposed to only be accessed by police officers. But Mr. Brown, who's not a police officer, attaches those in his message, and he sends it to the provincial commission. His word says, is a plot to charge you. Mr. Brown Mkhwanazi also sends a screenshot of a presentation that was made on the 30th of September 2024, a presentation that was titled 2024-2025 Division Crime Intelligence Policies. He sends this to myself, Lt General Mkhwanazi, as a provincial commissioner in KwaZulu-Natal. Surely this must have been a classified information where crime intelligence are presenting their policies. But this man has access to that, and he's not a policeman. When asked to share the copy of this presentation through that WhatsApp communication, he responded by saying, General Khan will brief you next week. There's only one General Khan in the South African Police Service, so is one General, Lieutenant General Sibia in the South African Police Service. I've never heard of any other lieutenant generals in any other way in the security cluster in the country with the very same names. So I assume that I know very well.
Yeah. Let's take the headlines. We'll come back to unpack that here with Chad Thomas. The headlines by Zwelibanzi Mazbuko.
Stay informed. Power Talk with Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, 9 a.m. to midday on Power 98.7.
If you've just joined us, we're in conversation with Chad Thomas, recapping the last 30 days since the explosive press conference by General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. It's exactly 30 days today since he made that press conference. And we played earlier, Chad, the clip of him referencing Brown Mkhwanazi. Who's Brown? Where is he now? What happened to him? since that expose?
He's been promising a lot of interviews. He had one particular interview. He claims to be very connected, and when one looks into his background, and there's been a lot of people coming forward. I know that Sunday World reported on some cases against him where he'd been found guilty involving assault GBH, some serious cases. We're talking about GBH being the worst kind of assault. But there's also been other cases opened against him over the years that people have come forward about. There's been cases involving kidnapping, there's cases involving murder, cases involving fraud. You're talking about somebody that has had maybe close on 20 criminal cases opened against him over the last 2 decades. Is this somebody that we want to have direct access to our leadership within the policing structures? Definitely no. Is he a double agent? Is he an agent provocateur? Is he an information peddler? Is he an informer? I don't know. But judging by his background, and he's going to come with this underground nonsense. The man was born in 1977. He wasn't in the struggle. He mustn't come with nonsense that he was in the underground. He can say he was in the underworld because his criminal record suggests he was in the underworld. But he mustn't come with this underground.
Lots of Mkhwanazis in the 80s, though.
Yeah, listen, born 1977.
I mean, he would have been 10 years, 87, 20 years, 97. So his teenage years would have been really in the 1990s. If he grew up in Mabatu, it was politically active. I don't know much, but if there were self-defense units there, but certainly there was some activity because that's the former Buputatswana.
Possible. Look, the SDUs were established, a lot of youngsters were involved. When one looks at people that got involved in the struggle at a very young age, we all know about Stompie, how tragically that ended. We even know that Malema started very, very young in politics as an activist. So it's possible that he was an activist, but I treat that with a pinch of salt, because why then do we not know more about that? Because members of the SDU continued their activism, continued to be a part of the struggle, moved into the more professional spheres of politics and became councillors, etc. This guy seemed to veer off in a completely different direction. And it's very disconcerting, exceptionally disconcerting. And I think a lot's going to come out. I'm looking forward to this commission beginning to hear testimony. I honestly do not believe 3 to 6 months is enough. Although we need a quick result, 3 to 6 months is not a lot, because this rot goes back decades.
Okay, let's just take a quick listen at the president's own response to Mkhwanazi.
And in many other ways. As we intensify the fight against crime, it is vital that we safeguard the integrity and credibility of the police and other law enforcement agencies. These allegations, therefore, call for an urgent and comprehensive investigation. To address these allegations and the implications of these allegations, I'm establishing a judicial commission of inquiry that will be chaired by Acting Deputy Chief Justice Mbuyisile Madlanga. Justice Madlanga will be assisted by Advocate Sesi Baloyi, Senior Counsel, and Advocate Sandile Khumalo.
Many people's reaction to this was another commission of inquiry. Well, we're already on the 5th day of August. What are your thoughts? Is this really going to be like the state capture? Does it have the capacity? At least, even if it means from a point of view of exposing the rot, would it really not have an impact?
It will have an impact. I think it's a very important commission of inquiry that we've needed for a very long time. The problem we have is they cannot look at what is happening now in isolation. They have to look at the historical context of SAPS and when it started going wrong from Celebi until now. And that's why I'm saying 3 to 6 months won't be enough. We need to hear from people on the record, who can be cross-examined, who can also give us insights. We need to hear from the Boysons of this world. We need to hear from the Van Lochrenbergs. Even though he wasn't in SAPS, he was in SARS, he has an insight into what was happening there. But of course, we need to know what's happening now so it can be curtailed. So ideally what needs to happen is there have to be parallel processes. IDAC, at the same time that this commission of inquiry is taking place, has to continue their investigations. IPID has to continue their investigations. IGI has to continue their investigations. Office of the DPCI judge has to continue their investigations. It cannot be like Zondo, where they wait for recommendations. It cannot just be the curiosity aspect of what's going to come out. We've already got tangible evidence and leads to follow. And these organizations need to follow without fear or favor, despite the fact that this commission is taking place in the background.
Suspension of Mkhunu. And let's take a listen to the president.
I have decided to put the Minister of Police, Mr. Senzo Mkhunu, on leave of absence with immediate effect. The Minister has undertaken to give his full cooperation to the Commission to enable it to work properly. I have decided to appoint Professor Firoz Kachalia as Acting Minister of Police. Professor Kachalia is currently a Professor of Law at the University of the Witwatersrand. And
again, weak assessment. People were like, why don't you just fire him?
Interesting dynamic. You have the step aside policy within the party, yet they don't seem to enforce it when it comes to certain people. Certain people may be regarded as sacred cows, perhaps. They're concerned about losing support within KwaZulu-Natal that comes with Mkhunu. But it's ridiculous that we're now sitting with two ministers, one staying at home, one that's active. The appointment of Kachalia, somebody who does not have political ambitions and is there just to concentrate on the job of policing, I think was a very clever move on the part of the president. I hope we see results coming out of that, but you can't expect an overnight change within an organization that has been systematically stripped of its credibility for more than 2 decades.
It's been 30 days. All Senzo Mkhunu has said is that he denies Brown Mkhotsi. If Brown Mkhotsi had the information that he does, it's not related to him. But I don't quite know if he has dismissed the instruction to disband the political killings task team.
Our politicians and our leaders need to be a lot more circumspect when it comes to dealing with individuals, and those that are part of their entourage of sorts need to ensure that they're kept away from individuals that can have a negative effect or cause a negative perception by pushing a specific narrative or agenda. I sat in a meeting many years ago when Jacob Zuma was still president, and in that meeting with Zuma was myself, a gentleman called Franz Richards, a gentleman called George Domonovich, a gentleman called the Reverend Tami Khumalo. And the discussion was the ground coverage report that Mdluli had disseminated and given out. And sitting in that meeting, I was quite taken aback how Zuma listened to these individuals. And Domonovich turned out to be an information peddler and an agent provocateur second to none. Yet the president at that time took his advice very seriously. And if he had done a deep dive into Domonovich, or his people around him had done a deep dive into Domonovich, meetings like that would never have happened. The ground coverage report of Mdluli would never have got legs. It would have been squashed there and then because it was an attempt to be exceptionally divisive and factionalism in terms of the way in which it was structured. And it was a conspiracy theory to try and make Zuma think there were people after him, just the same as the Browse Mall report had done to Mbeki. We need to make sure our leaders are not exposed to these agent provocateurs, because everybody comes with a narrative or an agenda. We need to identify what these are, and hopefully the commission will get to the bottom of this. One of the people that says he's got a lot of information and says he's done a lot of investigation into the police is Paul O'Sullivan. I hope that the commission gives him extended time to testify so that we can hear exactly what it is he's got and where he's getting it from.
What, and I'll come back to O'Sullivan. What do you predict would be the thing that Senzo Mkhunu will not be able to explain? I mean, I see him being able to walk himself out of Brown Mokgotsi if Brown does not have the records of communication between himself and the minister to prove that we are actually exchanging this information. Nonetheless, what are the other accusations that you think on these ones he's going to go down or he might be in trouble with?
The rationale in disbanding or instructing the disbandment of a unit that was making progress, and the instruction not to appoint a head of crime intelligence in a province that needs it most probably more than any other province. Those are two. He needs to be able to clarify what was engineered in the background to bring him to that decision-making basis of not appointing a senior position and disbanding a unit that is so critically important, where we as a country suffer from more political killings than almost any other country in the world.
And where 5 arrests were imminent. And it seems to me that part of the proper accusation is not just political interference, is defeating the ends of justice.
Correct. And it's sad that we still have this issue of factionalism within the leadership of the most critical component of law and order in South Africa. And if he's become part of this factionalism, he cannot be in a position of leadership. You need somebody in a position of leadership that is there to bring people together rather than to support the factionalism which results in deficit of leadership.
And then there is the aspect, obviously, then that relates to the two, well, more, but the two prominent arrests. Ket Matlala, who comes up in the conversations, and then Molefe. Just refresh the memories of our listeners and who these individuals are, and are we likely to see them being subpoenaed to go testify at the commission, including Brown Mokgotsi?
When one looks at Vusi Ket Matlala, one sees tenders hand over fist over the years. You see money being used to garner political influence. But more importantly, you see somebody who, if a deep dive had been done by crime intelligence, counterintelligence, those that need to vet individuals, they would have found somebody with an extremely checkered past. Also, previous convictions, linkages to organized crime syndicates. And this wasn't as if it was a well-kept secret. Everybody knew this. Now, how do you give somebody with such a checkered past one of the most important tenders, and that's the wellness of our South African police members? This is the contract that is there to look after members who are suffering from stress. It's there to ensure members are fit for duty. It's there to assist with the boarding process. Yet this man with his checkered past gets this vital tender with the South African Police Service, an organization that should actually be investigating him for his links to underworld gangs within Pretoria. It boggles the mind. Katie Molefe, much the same. Also a checkered history, also reported that he had criminal convictions for narcotics, re-emerged as a businessman. I suppose anybody can say they're a businessman these days. It depends what business you're doing. But again, Katie Molefe was identified as being involved in underworld circles. He was identified as being involved with murder for hire. He was arrested, released on bail, rearrested within weeks of that. These guys were connected to the very, very top, and it's an issue that I'm still astounded by. I'm still shocked by it because our leadership doesn't seem to have something in place to protect our ministers from people randomly communicating with them, meeting with them, spinning an agenda with them, and our leaders falling prey to whatever these narratives are.
But are they likely to go testify with regards to their relationship with either generals or the National Prosecuting Authority? We haven't seen much of that, but the second big name was the head of the NPA in Gauteng, who then got suspended as well. Quick refresh of the memory of our listeners about Chauke, I think?
Andrew Chauke.
Andrew Chauke. Who is he and what are the allegations on him?
So Chauke and his wife are both career prosecutors. They both work within the NPA, within the criminal justice system. There's been a lot of talk about Chauke being involved in ensuring that cases weren't enrolled, specifically with respect to state capture matters, and that he was frustrating processes within the NPA that frustrated the Hawks and frustrated other units. According to Shamila Batoy, she has requested the suspension for over a year now, and it's now finally arrived. But what people don't realize is Chauke, in terms of Section 35 of the Constitution, the presumption of innocence is there until it's proven otherwise. But as a DPP, people don't know the power a DPP has. The NDPP has power, but doesn't have the power people seems to think that the NDPP has. The DPP, the Director of Public Prosecutions for each province and for each specialized unit, basically runs that entire province or that entire unit. They are extremely powerful, and it's very difficult for the NDPP to overturn decisions by the DPP because the DPP is appointed by the president, not by the NDPP. So there's been this thing about Shamila Batoy not doing her job. Well, people need to understand the restrictions of her job. It's a fairly new position. We used to have AGs, Attorney Generals of our provinces, before we became a democracy and before we moved into having DPPs. DPPs are very, very powerful. So Chauke was an exceptionally powerful individual. And that's why Shamila Batoy couldn't suspend him. She couldn't take action. She had to have the president take action against him. And it was the president who seemed reluctant for more than a year to suspend Chauke. But now that's been done. This reckoning that's taking place in 2025 has far-reaching consequences.
And all these individuals are likely to be the witness list where they come one by one in front of the judge to give testimony, to respond to the allegations.
We sincerely hope so. The commission has powers of subpoena. You cannot refuse that subpoena. You would be held in contempt. So we do hope that Madlanga calls these important players from all sides to be able to testify. The information peddlers, the bad actors, the criminals, the policemen, the generals, the ministers, the PIs, anybody who's involved that has information or has decided to have a platform in all of this needs to be spoken to.
Finally, Parliament Ad Hoc Committee. What do you make of that? These are the parallel inquiries, as it were. The rest is criminal investigations and so on and so forth. But in this case, we are looking at two inquiries taking place at the same time. The other one, I see it being very judicious. Maybe Parliament as well, but lots of politicians here with the idea that this matter already was prioritized to them for 3 months and they couldn't get to the bottom of it, or they did nothing. What's likely to occur now with characters like Cameron, Breitenbach, who are already on the record to have some form of criticism of Mkhwanazi?
Look, they can have their criticism. It's their right. Freedom of association and who you want to speak about, as long as you come with facts and as long as you come with the right attitude. Breitenbach showed herself to be a true prosecutor in her interrogation of Kele during the G4S Correctional Services inquiry into the Thabo Bester escape. And she needs to come there with an open mind. she mustn't come there with confirmed bias like she's displayed now by saying that Mkhwanazi should have done something. He did. So she needs to put her confirmation bias aside, put on an objective hat, and find out exactly what's transpired. The same with Cameron and the same with everybody else that forms part of this ad hoc committee.
Who do you think will finish first between Madlanga and Parliament?
Parliament by far. There will definitely be an extension after 6 months. There will be the interim reports after 3 months from the Commission. The 6-month report can never be a final report. There's just too much to dig into. Parliament has already won the gold medal, with the Commission coming a close second with the silver. And we hope that all these other organizations have a joint bronze, whether it's IDAC, whether it's IPID, whether it's Office of the DPCI Judge, whether it's IGI. They've got an important role to play.
Chad Thomas, always a pleasure to have you here on the show. We'll obviously, hopefully have you as soon as the inquiry starts to help us process most of what will be submitted as a testimony. But thanks very much for creating time.
Thank you, sir.
It's 1100 hours, Bantwana Benkosi. It's time for the news with Sweli Barnes.